The bottom of the firewall must be raised 42 millimeters from the level beams supporting it at the front. In preparation for installation of the upper longerons, we need to ensure that the firewall is at its proper angle as prescribed in our plans. We can lock in the position of the firewall by taking a scrap piece of extrusion or angle and clamping it from the firewall to another rigid structure on the fuselage. It also needs to be level from left to right. Now we're prepared to install the upper engine mount. There will be, of course, 2 of these. We may have to file a small notch in order to gain better clearance where it fits around the flange at the firewall here. It attaches by simply drilling through the mounting hole from the front of the firewall back into the engine mount, and we will cleco it in place. And of course we will repeat for the other side. Now we can install the upper front longerons. There's a left and a right, and make sure they're not installed backwards, forward to rear. Use your plans to identify the left and the right and the front and the back. They will simply, for now, clamp on to the upper engine mount at the front, and the rear can be clamped to the rear upper longerons. We can then adjust them at the rear so that we get the top surface level. The front attachment, of course, is set in position by the upper engine mount. We want to confirm that the firewall has not moved from its position that we set earlier. And we can confirm that we have a level position from left to right. Once we are satisfied with our positions, we can then drill from our upper engine mounts into the top of the extrusion. Use your plans to locate the number of holes to be drilled. Take your time. None of this is difficult, and use clamps to hold things in place while drilling. At this time, we need to familiarize ourselves with the rear frame channel 6B52. Now, the first thing is to make sure you identify the top with the 90-degree flange and label it as the top. Then we need to identify the attach plates. There are two of these, 6B54. Now, the most important part on here is to find that there is a very slight bend, a 3-degree bend. Never be able to show you this here, but the bend going up becomes the front. So make sure you label the front. The bend comes up at you. And so we'll have two of these, one at each end. And although they are identical plates, you need to lay them out as if there was a left and a right. Now look at your plans for this, but one of the things we'll do is lay out some rivet lines. We're not going to drill these all out at this time, but lay them out. It's all in your plans as far as the distance. We're going to drill out the inboard edge only at this time because there will be other pieces that will sit on top of there. Now, once you've laid that out, another line you might want to make is the 50mm line. This is 50 millimeters from this edge, and draw a line like that because that will become the edge when you come down and place it on top of the rear frame channel. So I'm going to use my square to get this square, of course, but our goal is to get that line that we drew at 50 millimeters from the edge to line up with the edge of the channel. And of course use your square and get this perfect and centered. And when you do, you can then, after pre-drilling these holes in the attach plate, drill and cleco into the frame channel. You want to do this at both ends, and then we'll be just about ready to go and install this into the airframe. And finally, after positioning this, you want to draw a line onto the channel right at this edge so it looks something like this, because this will become useful when we go to make a slot in our side skin. This will define the lower limit and the upper limit. The rear frame channel will be located right behind the edge of your rear skin. Now, you will have to joggle the bottom flange, and you may also have to trim it so that it fits nicely between the bottom longerons. Now, because I have a table underneath the fuselage, I'm going to have a more difficult time drilling up through the rivet line. So I drew a line parallel to the pre-drilled holes 10 millimeters out so that I could line up the edge of the flange and make sure then as I drill up from the bottom that I hit the center of the flange. And I'll use a right angle drill to get underneath and catch a few holes in each end to secure the channel to the bottom of the floor. With the channel clecoed in place, I'm going to use my wooden jig to set the angle of the channel, and once that is set, I can then go ahead and trace the edge inside of the skin where we want to make our cutout, from the top of the channel down to where the tab ends right here. So this piece I'm going to cut out on both sides because remember our attach tab will bolt on at that location. For cutting this out, I'm simply going to drill 2 holes in the corner and then use my snips to remove the piece. And that way my corners will have nice radiuses in them. An alternate method for supporting the fuselage is to raise the beams off the table using a pair of sturdy horses at each end. This will provide more access to the underneath of the fuselage where some drilling through the pre-drilled holes will be required. We used a combination of both methods, both on the table and on the sawhorses, and it was easy to transfer halfway through the project. Important to recheck the leveling whenever you make a move like that. Looking at the top extrusion where it joins the firewall, we're going to make some marks so we can lay out some additional components. Starting at the web of the firewall, going back, I made a mark at 475 millimeters. Take a look at your plans, these numbers are in there, and then from this mark I made another mark at 895 millimeters. This mark at 895 is going to be the location of 6B166, the upper rear seat support. Now, before we put that into position, we want to set the distance across the two top longerons so that the seat support will fit properly. Notice I've taken a piece of angle and clamped it to the top of each of the extrusions, and that way I can set the distance. For example, we want the distance at our 895 mark to be 1120 millimeters across. So I put my tape measure at that location going across the fuselage, and when I got my 1120 from outside to outside, I then clamped this temporary piece of extrusion in place to hold the width of the fuselage in place so that I could place the seat support where it's supposed to go. And this is 6B166, the rear seat support. The 90-degree angle will go at the bottom and the flange will face to the rear, and we're going to place the upper radius at that 895 millimeter mark, and that will go underneath the extrusion and in between the extrusions. The top of the radius needs to be even with the very top of the extrusion, so this corner will need to be filed away completely at the radius in order that this top edge will be even with the top of the extrusion. So at both ends we need to mark enough so that we can raise this up even. And here's what the corner looks like after I ground it away. Now I simply used a bandsaw to cut in and to cut down, and then used a file to radius the sharp corner. And this way the top longeron will be able to fit in there and allow the edge to come up even with the very top edge of the longeron. We now need to locate 6B151. These are two gussets, left and right, that will be used also with the upper rear seat support. Now, one modification we need to make to this part is on the smaller flange where it meets the angle up here, we need to remove that piece, because as it fits on top of the support, this large flange, the piece will come on like this, and if you notice, there is a radius missing until we actually cut out that piece. Now this will be more obvious when you actually go to install it, but just be aware that I am going to radius this out, that little triangle corner, and then use my file to open that up so that it sits nicely across the radius of the support. Here's looking from above. The triangular gusset's in place, and I have marked 2 rivet holes at either end. I won't mark or drill the center ones yet. Notice I have it clamped with spring clamps onto the front flange of the support. And I also need to mark and trim off where the gusset overhangs the edge. And I will mark and drill the most inboard 2 rivet holes after I put the tape across the top and reconfirm the distance between the 2 longerons as 1120. Check your plans. Periodically, as we add components to the fuselage, we want to make sure that the fuselage is aligned properly, not racked, and we can brace it into proper alignment by using an L angle or extrusion clamped to help us prop it up. Our primary tool for keeping the fuselage in alignment is this laser. This is a garden variety laser found at a home builder supply store. They're not really very expensive, about $50 or so. This one we've mounted behind the fuselage, and it will cast a vertical line, and with that vertical line we can compare it to center points that we make along the fuselage and make sure the fuselage is held in perfect alignment. We're going to move on to installing the instrument panel. As we go back along our top longeron, we come to the 475 mark that we made previously, and we want to clamp an extrusion or a heavy L all the way across at the 475 mark. Then we're going to take our panel gusset 6B12-5. Here we go. And I drew a rivet line along the longest end without the flange. There's the longest end without the flange. And this will be located right on top of the extrusion, just in front of, just by 1 millimeter or 2, our line, because the panel's going to sit on the front on this gusset, and the web of the panel is supposed to be in line with the edge, which is our 475 mark. So I have this just forward of that mark just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and drill 1 hole into the extrusion. And remember, you're shooting for just under 10 millimeters from the edge of the extrusion. Don't get too close to the bend. And we'll put one of these on both sides, as there is a left and right to this gusset. With the gussets in place, we can take the panel and lay it up against our temporary angle or extrusion, because that will be the location for the face or the web of the panel. And then we're going to need to center this equidistant from both sides. And once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and trace a line on the gusset, and we'll get 3 rivets between the gusset and the panel on both sides. Now the main gear attachment, 6B11-4, has a left and a right. It's important to note that the aft end has a slight angle in it. Probably hard to see, but it has a slight 5-degree bend at the end. So just make sure you have the left versus the right correct. The bend goes towards the rear. And of course the mounting tab, which goes under the gear channel, and the outside end has the studs on it. Do not hesitate to cut back more on the edge of the channel so that it doesn't ride up into the radius of the weld of the fitting. I'm preparing to drill the pilot side, and notice I have C-clamped the attachment securely and squarely underneath the gear channel. I have already drilled my 9 pilot holes, and I will proceed to drill and cleco. The side flanges of the bottom floor pan will probably need to be bent up. You can form these with a seaming plier or even just use your hands. This part will be on the inside of the side skin, but it does need to be almost vertical at the back end here. Here is a view of one of the side skins. Both the left and the right are identical, so either one can be used. Notice all of the pre-drilled holes, which makes alignment of the attaching structures quite easy. The fuselage side skin can be hung on temporarily with C-clamps along the edge, getting the top edge even with the top longeron. You may have to trim in front of the rear attach bracket in order to get the skin to move back far enough. Just a small trimming. And then you also need to trace around the inside to get the gear channel cut out, approximately right there. You'll see that from the inside. And here's an inside shot of the gear channel. You can simply trace around it with a pen and then cut that out easily with a tin snip, making sure you radius the corners. Trimming may be necessary just in front of the rear channel attach in order to get the skin to move back a bit if necessary. We've reinstalled the side skin and clecoed the gear fitting in place. Now we have a couple of uprights to put into place, 6B11-3. These are simply extrusions. I've drawn a center line, rivet line down the center of one of the flanges. Now look at your plans, but the angle or the corner of each extrusion will be pointing inward towards the center channel. Showing your plans. Basically, I'm going to follow the pre-drilled holes from the top longeron straight down and simply place the upright extrusion on those holes and butt it up against the top extrusion. And when I find the center line through the pre-drilled holes, I will go ahead and drill this. Now, of course, I'm going to stop when I come to the area of the gear fitting down here. Now, we have another one of these which will go right over along the other set of pre-drilled holes on the other side of the gear channel. And again, looking for the center line, we'll drill with size 40 pilot holes and then stop when I get towards the gear fitting down here. The lengths of these we're not going to be too concerned about right now because we can take them off and trim them later. This one will need to be fitted up against another channel at the bottom here. The one on the aft end will need to be trimmed because it needs to fit right above the bottom longeron flange and of course the flange of the upper longeron. So this one you'll need to trim right away to fit nicely between those two. This one we'll leave untrimmed and trim it later when we insert and install the other gusset. Because the mounting bolts that pass through the gear fitting also must be centered exactly in the middle of the extrusions we just installed, it is important to extend the rivet line down onto the gear fittings so that we have an accurate location for those bolts. Now, looking at your plans, you notice we need a couple more holes down in the flange of the gear fitting. Recommend to not drill the holes from the outside in, because if you do, there's a good chance you'll miss the center of the extrusion behind it, and we have some bolts that are going to go through here. What is better is to mark the location on the fitting and then measure those locations from one of the existing holes. Then take the extrusion off from the back, locate one of the holes, and then apply that measurement from that hole to the fitting onto the extrusion and drill the holes so that you can get them right in the center. Then place the extrusion back on and back drill from the extrusion into the fitting. And that way it'll guarantee that you have the best edge distance for these holes at the very bottom of the extrusion on the inside. Then the rest of these holes, as located in your plans, we have 5 across the top, 10 millimeters down, evenly spaced. We will not drill the very bottom holes here yet. We're going to save those until we put in the gusset which goes behind it, because we also want to locate those holes quite accurately. We have a gusset that needs to be located at the top of each of these uprights where they join the top longeron. This is 6B14-1, and it very intuitively goes right here. And be sure to catch all of the pre-drilled holes in both the upper longeron and the upright. Now we're going to take a look at installing the gusset 6B10-4. There are 2 of these, a left and a right, and let's examine where this is going to be located. we're going to align it so that it is even with the edge of the floor, all the way at the edge. So I'm going to look kind of underneath and get this flange even with the edge of the floor so that the radius makes a nice corner. And then up at the front, I have temporarily inserted it underneath the spar flange so I can locate two of the holes, and I will do the same at the back at the channel flange and locate the hole. And then underneath, you will notice that all of the pre-drilled holes for the longeron underneath are there, and we'll either back drill up from the bottom and catch those in here. Now also, we're going to need to put another line of rivets towards the radius. Look at your plans for their location, and those will end up towards the edge of the floor. I'm going to put in that last row of rivets later when I have better access to underneath, because I don't want to drill from the top because we're very close to the edge over here, and it will be easier for me anyway to locate those when I have the bottom accessible. But at least for now, I can catch these from underneath by back drilling, and we have one for each side, of course. Now I should mention that we need to trim off this upright that we installed later so that it is above the flange of our gusset, so these butt up against each other. Now what we also need to do is locate another hole for our landing gear fitting right below this last hole in our upright, and I'm going to locate that in this flange and drill it. And looking at your plans, you'll notice we'll have a second one right next door. Now rather than drilling that from the gear attachment on the other side, I'm going to reference this last hole so I can find it on the gear fitting, but mark and drill it from here so that I get my edge distance just right, and then back drill into the gear on the other side. With our two gear fitting holes in place, we can continue in this flange here. Look at your plans. I believe they call for, they're going to be A5 pitch 20 across. We can lay out this rivet line from the outside of the skin. We want to defer drilling the last one or two holes at this end, at the forward end, because we're going to have another channel that comes down this direction, and we'll catch those later. And we have another set of two holes to make in the gear at the rear end of the fitting. There's one visible here, and then the other one is further to the rear. Can't see in this picture. And that should be all of the holes in the gear fitting. And a view from the other direction. We're going to take a look at the wing attachment upright 6B13-1. Now there are two sets of pairs, or four pieces, and it's important to identify the left versus the right. Now if you put them together, large flange to large flange, you'll notice the angle, and this will be different from the left versus the right wing. And you can picture the fuselage going across this way and the spar coming in at it the other direction. These will have to be trimmed, and we'll hold them up into place where they are to be located and get them installed. They go in front and behind the spar. The large flange goes against the spar and the narrow against the skin. And they will be too long, so we will trim these down And in fact, the trimming should be done at an angle to fit just underneath the longeron for a nice fit, as close as possible. So I will mark and cut. Here's another angle looking from behind the spar. We'll go into the slot and tight against the skin after we cut them. And here they are, trimmed and just temporarily put into place. Now before we do anything, we want to make sure we have our spar jigs in place, both sides. And the pins in the center hole, as this will fix the center spar and make it rigid, which is what we need prior to drilling the uprights into the skin. And you may need to trim the corner off of the front upright down here in case it runs into the radius of the floor. Be sure to protect your surfaces with cardboard or wood or duct tape. Now I'm going to go ahead and drill through the pre-drilled holes on the other side of these, through the side skin and into the uprights. Here's a view from the outside. Now the spar jig did have to be removed to catch the rest of the holes because it's blocking one side from this point down. This is a good time to re-verify that our fuselage is square by using our laser and a level. Notice we can make fine adjustments by merely pressing on the side of the fuselage. Excellent. We can lock the fuselage in place by making a brace out of clamps and a piece of spare angle or extrusion. For this next operation, we need to obtain a center punch of the proper diameter, as we need to accurately mark our wing uprights for drilling. With the fuselage squared, we will remove each pin one at a time and use the center punch to mark a small divot into each of the uprights. Later then we can actually drill the hole. Now we're going to take the upright channel 6B56, and there are two of these. We're going to need to joggle both ends on the same side, because one end is going to touch the bottom longeron extrusion, and the top is going to do the same, the upper longeron extrusion. So we want to joggle each end after we cut them to length. Now, these are going to be located against the side of the fuselage back at our rear channel attach bracket. Let's take a look. Now we're looking inside the fuselage. This is our pilot side attach bracket, and on the other side of this skin is where our spar attaches. And remember, we drilled a number of holes here, and a number of the other rivet locations we simply marked but did not drill. Our channel, our upright channel, is going to slip down, and notice here's the spar extrusion, and that's why we had to do the joggle down there. And this will sit flat against and in front of our attach bracket, and then the upper end of this will be underneath the upper longeron. Now, by holding it tight against the bracket and against the fuselage, we can trace around the upright on the bracket. And what that allows us to do is to see the outer limits of that channel. And that way, when we lay out our rivets, and they should be laid out correctly here, we can make sure that they are within the 10 millimeter edge of the channel. So since my rivet lines fall within the area of the web of the channel, I'm going to go ahead first and drill through these marks into the back part behind it, the horizontal piece. Then I can put the channel back and then back drill through the other side and into the upright channel. It is this location where we have no rivet marked that is our no rivet zone. So I'm simply using the markings we made earlier when we created the attach bracket. I'm going to go ahead and drill those into the back channel first. And notice the no rivet zone right in here on both sides. The best way to locate the correct position for the rear seat support is to look for these holes on the side of the fuselage skin, and notice that when you hold this vertical, you want about 10 to 12 millimeters behind this series of holes, as an L angle will go in here. But this probably gives you the best location for this as far as locating it forward and aft on both sides. And that will also become useful when we attach the other members to this in order to line up with the pre-drilled holes in the side skin. So when the side skins are on, you can then permanently drill and cleco the support in place, locating it as we described here. Also, be sure to set the width of your cabin before drilling to the dimension your plan shows, in my case 1120 millimeters from outside edge to outside edge. And this will also fix the width at the top of your fuselage. We need to fabricate the seat back side channel 6B16-3. There's two of these. Now we're going to have to do a little bit of cutting and forming, but they are symmetrical channels. Flange is the same angle on both ends. But because of the way we're going to attach this, if we look at our plans, we see that on one end we need to have a cutout. This is going to go back down along the seat panel itself. Now this cutout here with a radius in the corner is going to be the same on both sides. Radius in the corner. And then on the other side, we're going to do something a little bit different. One side will have just an angle cut in it, and the other side will have a cutout. Now this is in your plans, a cutout about 5 millimeters off this edge here, and then about 20 millimeters down from this edge. Now this will become much more apparent when we go to place this in place. And by the way, the left versus the right means you will switch the angle cut with the cutout at this end between the left and the right. And this will become very apparent when we go to install it. Let's take a look at how this will get installed. I'm at the pilot side, and here's the rear seat panel attached down to the floor. And up at the top here is our upper rear seat support that we installed previously. The tab with the cutout on both sides is going to sit against the seat down here, and up at the top we slide it underneath. And of course we'll make one for the passenger side also. A flange that goes against, on the flange that goes against the side, you want to draw a rivet line down the center, because we're going to look for that rivet line against the fuselage side. Now I've clamped a piece of angle to the rear seat panel, and then also to the top support to keep the seat panel nice and straight while installing this. There are going to be 2 rivets up at the top into our gusset. The bottom we're going to leave alone for now. We'll get another piece on top of it, but I'm going to go ahead and locate and drill along the side into the flange when I get nice and close to the rivet line that I drew in the center of the flange. And we'll wait to attach the bottom a little bit later. After installing the upright, you can then proceed to drill and cleco the side skins. Now before you do, be sure your top skin up here is even with the top of the longeron. You can adjust if necessary. And your rear skin is the prescribed amount above the longeron also. And of course make sure your jig is in place, because that will hold the angle of the rear spar attach bracket in place. And drill and cleco as far as you can, and then of course remove the jig and you can drill and cleco the rest of the holes, the pre-drilled holes. Now we can take a look at installing the supports for the baggage floor. Now I have removed the 2 uprights towards the rear of the fuselage that we had only clecoed in previously. And I'm taking a piece of L, standard L, that is cut to fit between the upright that supports our rear spar brackets, and following the pre-drilled holes along the side, all the way up to where they end here, and in fact they end right at the intersection with one of the vertical supports. And we're simply going to draw a line down the center of an L and look for that line through the pre-drilled holes that run the length at a diagonal. And we'll go ahead and drill and cleco this in place. After we do that, we can then cut our vertical L supports that we removed to proper size so that they come just underneath and intersect with the horizontal or diagonal L. Now we're almost done, except we have a section in front of the piece we put on here, and it's going to go from the channel back to the upright. And so we're going to start with a piece of L. The problem is we can't just bolt this in there because the side is curved. So we need to start off with a piece of L approximately 210 millimeters long, and then we're going to crimp the top so that we can get a bend in this to follow the contour of our inside of the side skin. I started by measuring and putting 3 lines. The first line, the first line I put was 60 millimeters back from the edge, and then another 40 and another 40. So I have 3 marks, 60, 40, and 40. And those are going to be the locations of crimps. And I will use the crimping tool that we got with our kit, and we will put some crimps in there. Since we want this edge to curve, we're going to shrink or crimp the top flange. And we'll do that with our crimping tool. I'm simply going to insert it at the line and rock it one way and then rock it the other. I'm not going to go too far because it's harder to take these crimps out after the fact. So by rocking it one way and then rocking it back the other way, and you can control how much you bend into it, you get these shapes. And notice how it is starting to take a curve. Now as you rock further and further, it will bend more and more. Now we want to hold this up to our inside skin and get it just the way we want for a nice fit. Now we want to locate the bulkheads, starting with 6B12-3, the smallest one. Now we're at the rear of the fuselage. Here's our horizontal attach brackets. And looking at the plate, we're going to use the front edge of this plate as a reference mark to situate the bulkhead. And notice the flange goes to the rear, and I'm simply placing it on top of the longerons and even with the plate. This edge right here goes even with the face. Now we may need to trim the corners of the flange on the bulkhead to fit into the radius of the top longerons. But we'll make this nice and even with the front plate across the edge here. And notice I have marked a mark down the center of the bulkhead flange. This will be a reference place from which we will measure the other bulkheads along the longeron. So once this is in place, make the mark from the center of the flange onto the longeron, and that will be our 0 reference mark. I can go ahead and drill and cleco this rear bulkhead into the center of the longeron flanges, and later we will drill and cleco into the top plate. Also notice that we want to position the bulkhead left to right so that the flange meets even with the outside of the skin on both sides, so that when we fit our skin over this, it makes a nice continuous journey across. After the first bulkhead's installed, we will measure from our reference line, center of the flange forward, check your plans, to 650 millimeters and place a mark, and that will become the center for our two-hold bulkhead, and that will be located right like that. Again, the center of the flange. And we'll check this measurement on both sides, and likewise drilling cleco to the longeron. And remember, as necessary, trim the corner of the flange so that it fits nicely into the longerons and doesn't ride up into the radius.
Well, an old TBM will do that. Maybe it's faster than that anyway. He was telling me that.
And the third and final bulkhead is 1270. Check your plans from the first bulkhead, center of the flange. The flange of the large bulkhead, 6B12-2, becomes the back edge for the luggage for the baggage compartment floor. The baggage floor needs some minor trimming at each of its four corners. At the front, this part needs to be trimmed to follow the curvature of the fuselage. The back corners are a little bit easier with the dimensions in the plans. Now we set the baggage floor in, and it fit without any additional trimming other than the very corners that we described before. The very back edge of the baggage floor is even with the flange on the bulkhead. Here's a look from the rear. And the very rear of the floor is even with this back flange, and I have it temporarily clamped in place. One of our next steps is to create the cutouts on both the left and right side. Now, you want to remove your baggage floor and cut two L angles of just the right length to fit in between the fuselage sides, the vertical upright L's on both sides. You want to make sure your bulkhead is in place so you hold the sides apart at the proper distance, and then fit these L's in and clamp them to the uprights. Notice your plan on which way the bend goes. And then you can put the baggage floor back in place if you want, and crawl underneath and then mark on the bottom of the baggage floor these. Then remove the baggage floor, take these off, and you want to drill and clecal them to the bottom of the baggage floor. Then later we'll remove these from the baggage floor, put the floor back in, and then re-clecal these from underneath, because notice they are sitting underneath the horizontal L on both sides of the fuselage skin. And eventually we'll drill these all together for the support back here. During installation of the baggage floor, we want to make some additional checks on how square the fuselage is, because that baggage floor is really going to solidify the structure. This is best done prior to drilling the baggage floor in place. Now we're going to install the upper channel, and this is 6B53. It will span the width of the fuselage behind the vertical uprights that attach to our rear spar attach. Now these will be located right beneath the horizontal L angles and up tight against the channel, the back side of the channel. Now I'm going to trace on the channel right along the edge of the upright so that I can tell where the rivet location should be. And this will be positioned from left to right centered, and I will mark on both sides, the left and right side, right along the upright so that I can identify the rivet area where I want to drill and rivet. Here's another angle. And then we want to lay out 4 rivet locations with the proper edge distance on both sides, and I will pre-drill these with number 40 holes. Now we want to cut a small L angle that's just long enough to fit up behind the channel here. And it will go like this. We do want to drill into 6B16-6, but don't drill into the side of the fuselage yet, as our floor is going to sit, our baggage floor will sit here, and only when it's in here will we get the proper angle, and then we can drill to the side skin. We want one of these for both sides, and I'm going to drill 4 rivet holes for the channel. We may have to remove 6B16-6 in order to get those holes in there. Once you've reinstalled the baggage bottom, You then need to do one final squaring up using your laser or plumb bob as necessary. Now once you have the fuselage completely squared up, you can then hold the fuselage square by attaching clamps to affix the baggage bottom with the lip of the rear bulkhead, and that will keep the fuselage from racking any further. You can then drill and cleco, pitch 40, use your plans, to hold the back of the fuselage, to hold the back of the baggage bottom to the bulkhead, and then we'll move forward to affix the baggage bottom to one of the front cross members. I have drawn a rivet line across the upper channel 6B53 and have marked the rivet line and spaced them out, pitch 40 using my rivet fan. And by drilling and cleco this will now hold our fuselage square so we don't have to worry about it racking out of true center anymore. We also want to move forward then, and once we position the seat back channel properly, we can then rivet pitch 40 along the edge after we first draw a rivet line. Notice I've drawn two lines 180 millimeters apart, centered from left to right across the fuselage. These will be future rivet lines for some angles that will go underneath. The angles are 160 millimeters apart, and then another 20 millimeters for the rivet line. And so I made sure when laying out my rivet pattern that a rivet would go here and here, and from those 2 points I spaced my pitch 40 as necessary. We will drill these rivet lines later when we build the L into place. And here's the baggage floor, all drilled and clecoed in place. Even the side L's that hold up the edge of the bottom have been drilled. Now I found it easier to remove these L's off of the side of the fuselage and pre-drill them on a table, and then reinserted them, and that made it easier to back drill from underneath up into the top. And did that on both sides, reconnected the cross L's going across. The splice area can now be riveted. There's a total of 8 rivet locations, including the one that goes through the flange of the bulkhead, so the other 7 are evenly spaced on the remaining portion. I have installed a L angle where the panel normally goes to hold the sides apart at their proper distance and to give me a little more access area without having the panel in place. Now, one of the first L's we want to put in is a vertical L along the pre-drilled holes just north of the wing spar, and this L angle needs to be bent into the shape that I'm holding here. And this is actually quite easy to make. You're going to start off with a straight piece of L, and this is in your plans, and mark the crimp locations from the end, which is also in your plans. First one's at 30, and then the next 6 of them are at 25. Use your crimping tool and it will very quickly turn into something that looks like this. The location of those crimps allows this shape to take place automatically. And once you have it in rough shape, you can then place it against the pre-drilled holes up here and note that it comes very close to matching the curvature of the skin. I'm also going to draw a line down the center flange so that we can look for that through the pre-drilled holes, and there'll be one on the left and the right side. Now, before installing this, we're going to need to push the bottom of the skin in. As you can see, it flexes, and I'm going to duct tape this whole front area in so that it's nice and tight and in its final location, so that this L angle goes in properly, and then we can proceed to the horizontal L's. There'll be 3 of them, and all you have to do is follow the pre-drilled holes on the side skin. And the third L actually overlaps the 2 pieces of side skin, the piece of the floor and the actual side skin itself, and the L runs along it, and again using the pre-drilled holes so that it makes it very easy to determine exactly where these pieces go. And here we're preparing the passenger side skin up at the firewall, duct taping it nice and tight. Get a helper to help you. And then the first row of rivets to be drilled from the inside is the very bottom, holding a wood block on the outside while somebody drills from the inside through that entire line of pre-drilled holes at the very bottom edge. And I'm referring to these holes down here. At the very corner of the floor and the side skin. Those pre-drilled holes is where we want to begin our drilling and clecoing as we hold the skin tight. We are going to drill from the inside out while someone holds a block of wood over the rivet line, holds it firmly so that you're drilling through the 2 skins and into the wood. And we're going to do that for the entire length of that rivet line. And that will hold our skin in the proper shape so that we can then proceed to add the L angles on the inside. Also extend the rivet lines to the firewall and cleco against the firewall so that there are no gaps and it is nice and tight. And cleco at the bottom, and then you can start with the vertical and horizontal L angles as we describe. Also extend the rivet line at the very top edge of the skin. After the clecos are in place, notice how nicely the curved vertical L you previously created fits into the contour of the skin. Looking for the rivet line through the pre-drilled holes, we can go ahead and rivet this in place. We have our vertical L clecoed into place, and we have the top horizontal L clecoed into place following the pre-drilled holes, and the second L clecoed in place and drilled, and also drilled all the way forward to the firewall, extending the line of rivets to the firewall. We have one more L down here. We have a set of pre-drilled holes, except these don't go all the way through, so we need to first drill from the inside out into the side skin and then install our third and final L along that line. We need to fabricate gusset 6B15-3. Now this will go in the very corner on the bottom floor of the fuselage next to your curved piece. We need to come up with a way for it to fit. We need to trim this, and basically the technique we're going to use is to hold the gusset up to our curved piece, keep it horizontal, keep this part horizontal, and then trace the back where this curves around, and go ahead and cut it. So by following the contour down to the floor, this will sit flat on the floor. That curvature is what we're trying to trace onto this piece. And here's our cut piece as opposed to the original shape. Let's go install this and see what it looks like. We need to install a rolled gusset 6B15-2. The wide part goes towards the front, and it fits right in this area between the channel where your heel goes and the side skin, and it's going to fit right in right here. I'll go ahead and make some rivet lines and install it exactly in its location. There'll be 4 rivets along each edge, 10 millimeters from the edge, and the part with the angle will go along the heel support. I'll mount that first, and the 90-degree corner goes up. So there is a left and right. And I've drawn a line about 20 millimeters from the edge of the heel support, and that will locate the edge of the gusset. Now we're going to install the lower engine mount. There's a left and a right. We're looking at the right side. Let's go install the left side. We're up at the very bottom corner inside the firewall. Notice it will be 2 bolts, 3/16, A and 3. And we want to drill these from the bottom because they need to go through the center of the flange of our extrusions, our longerons, on the bottom. It's important to drill from the bottom so we get these centered. These have been drilled. Notice the front one about 13 millimeters from the front, and then about another 65 millimeters back for the second one. It's clecoed from the inside. We'll drill up from the bottom and into the mount. It's also important that the mount be centered so that the actual mounting hole is centered in the middle of the steel mount. Both of these fittings need to be primed and painted to protect from rusting. At this time, we're going to remove the seat back panel completely from the fuselage to make some preparations for our next step. We're looking at the back of the seat panel, and we're going to attach to it this angle doubler 6B16.5. And this is a piece of 40 thousandths angle. It's cut to the right length so it'll fit up under the lip up here and strengthen this upper flange. Now, right where the lightning hole is, we're going to need to make a cutout so that it will clear the flange. And you notice I just trimmed this off and filed it so that there's a small arc in there. Now, if you look at your plans, the rivet spacing is every 35 millimeters along the top and the other side of the flange of the doubler. However, we have some locations where we don't want to rivet at this time. I'm going to turn this around. Notice I have marked the center right above the lightning hole. Now, 100 millimeters to either side of the center is where I have marked a no rivet zone. So for that 200 millimeters centered on the center of the lightning hole, do not apply any of the rivets or do any of the drilling at this time for the doubler. And then looking over at the passenger side, from the edge, I've also marked another no rivet zone, 50 millimeters from that edge. And back to the pilot side, quite a larger distance, I've marked 170 millimeters. Again, a no rivet zone because we're going to have other brackets attaching in this location. So outside of those no rivet zones, apply your 35 millimeter rivet pitch, mark, and drill both flanges. Reinstalled the rear seat panel back in place. I have the doubler clecoed. Now we want to take a look at the center seat back channel 6B16-2. Now this channel is symmetrical, so you can choose either side. I chose what I consider to be the top and found the center and drew a line down the center. As my top, I need to trim the angles on both sides because we are going to slip it underneath here. And also notice I have marked the center of the fuselage from left to right. And we want this to fit nicely underneath here. And the distance now at the bottom, I'm going to mark where the top of the seat panel intersects with this seat back channel because I'm going to need to trim off the end flange on both sides so that it sits flat against the channel. So notice I've made a mark on the side, and I'm basically going to trim off this piece on both sides. And here's a close-up look after the edge was trimmed. Notice the radius at the corner to prevent cracking. Use a round file to do that. And then if your measurements are good, it will fit in something like this. Now we're going to trace on the back side here to pick up the lightning hole and trim this out so that the lightning hole is unobstructed. And here's with the cutout. I've extended the rivet line across the face. We're going to have 7 rivets equally spaced along this line, and then 2 and 2 over here. Check your plans, it will show this. And that will attach it to the rear seat panel. And be sure to, of course, center it from left to right. And at the top, across, we're going to have pitch 35. Now we're going to add an L angle, which we drew the rivet line for on the baggage floor previously. That will be the center. And we'll move the L angle all the way back till it stops, and then 1 rivet into the side of the upright, and we will then trim it. And we have one of these for both sides. I'm going to draw a center line on the L and then pre-drill the holes, pitch 40, check your plans, and locate the center when drilling.